ஹாய் ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸ், நான் உங்கள் ஆனந்த். நானும் எங்கள் அண்ணன் லலினும் சேர்ந்து இயற்கை விவசாயம் சம்மந்தமாக வீடியோ போடுறோம். எங்கள் சேனல் பிடிச்சிருந்தா சப்ஸ்கிரைப் பண்ணி உங்கள் ஆதரவை கொடுங்க.
So my name is Krishna. And if you look at the society today, food is just functional. You eat to go to job, to get money, and the cycle goes on. He came from Germany. He lived here in the 70s, and he told me all about Auroville, and I was like, wow, that's where அது எங்க தலைவிதி இங்கதான். So my name is Krishna. I'm from England, and I studied in J. Krishnamurti School in England. J. Krishnamurti is, I don't know if you're familiar with he's an Indian philosopher who had schools that are very alternative schools. Maybe you know J. Krishnamurti? So you should know about J. Krishnamurti. He's one of the great teachers, like philosophers, teachers in India. And he had these schools where the kids were not, they weren't competing against each other. There was no punishment. There was no reward. It was very much a space where you could grow in freedom. And in that school, I was there for 4 years in England. There's schools also in India, Rishi Valley, in Benares, in Pune, in Bangalore. And in that school in England, I was very free to explore more deep questions about the life, and that space was there in that school. And I was doing research in genetic engineering, actually. In laboratory we were writing papers and publishing them. But I was also running the vegetable garden. I was studying jazz guitar with a very top jazz guitarist, actually from India, and I was doing a lot of theatre, so it was quite an eclectic sort of education. And it was in that space of freedom, of exploration, that I really got this feeling that if we live close to nature, understand where our food comes from, and start participating in that relationship, that can bring about some awareness about ourselves. So it's like something to go hand in hand. And all my friends went to study in the USA in liberal arts colleges, and I came to live in Auroville. So the gardener who had lived in Auroville in the 70s, the gardener and the principal were paid the same. They were both considered educators. So he told me about Auroville, and he's from, you're from Germany? Holland, sorry. So he came from Germany, and he lived here in the 70s, and he told me all about Auroville, and I was like, wow, that's where அது எங்க தலைவிதி இங்கதான் இங்க இருக்கு. So I came here when I was 19, and it was around the same time with working with this guy in the garden that I discovered my guru, who is a Japanese, guru is a big word, but it's like my inspiration. He's a Japanese Zen master farmer called Masanobu Fukuoka. So he wrote a very famous book called The One Straw Revolution. And he was a short little guy with a white beard, indigo kimono, wooden chapels, and he didn't talk much. He was already 92 then, but he did like drawings. But one thing he did say, he said one thing to us very clearly, was only a fool will understand the nature. பைத்தியக்காரன் தான் நம்ம இயற்கை தான் புரிஞ்சுக்க முடியும். ஏன்னா புத்திசாலி அது என்ன பண்ணிடுச்சு, தண்ணி இல்லை சென்னையில், நீலதான் வரைக்கும் போயிடுச்சுல்ல, ஆனால் தண்ணி இல்லை சென்னையில், Hyderabad, Bangalore. We put a man on the moon, but there's no water left in Chennai, So we're very proud of all our learning. We put a buggy on Mars, but there is no, the basics we've lost. And I think that if you see that as a sort of a metaphor of what's happening on this planet, you can see that we are moving more and more away from the fundamental, the foundations of our life, which are obviously reflected in a relationship with nature. And we're going towards more and more cerebral things, AI and artificial intelligence. We want to this guy Musk, he wants to go to the moon with a car, and God knows what he wants to do, you know. So we're spinning out, and this is one of the things that Fukuoka drew. He drew a spiral. He said this is man's activity on the planet. It always goes away from himself. If you take farming, it's it's machinery, tractors, combines, then chemicals, herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, then it's things like hybrid seeds, and then genetically modified crops, and eventually we're on the moon trying to grow carrots. So his whole philosophy was that of a non-interventional farming, a farming where there is no direction. So it was stop plowing, stop using machinery, stop using chemicals, come to a point of non-action. And in that non-action, maybe we will discover our relationship with nature. So this philosophy, which is called do-nothing farming or natural farming, it's become kind of quite well known in India to a certain extent. I think that people understand it to their various degrees. You know, it's a bit like, yoga. Some person will understand this much and some person will understand that much. So, but for me, it's not about techniques. Like Fukuoka was growing rice and summer rice and winter grains, and he was growing them without plowing, without using compost, without chemicals. It was a non-interventional way of farming. It was a way of farming that recognized nature's already perfect. There's very little that we actually need to do. And I think that what's happened at Solitude is really a manifestation of what Fukuoka was talking about, but not with the techniques. Of course, his techniques would be different. Techniques are dependent on topography, on climate, on geography, even on demographics, defined techniques. But this is really a philosophy. And what's happened is he has a very famous book that if you're inspired by what we're talking about today, you could read that book. It's called The One Straw Revolution. So his whole premise was that when we return organic matter back to the soil becomes healthy. And with a healthy soil, whole life emerges. What's happened at this farm is we haven't let go of that, basically, over the last 25 years. Every leaf, every branch, every stick, every weed has been honored and valued and returned back to the soil. And soil has become alive. We can have a look at the soil here, for example. In the mannu uyiram irukku. Puchi, microorganism, in the kalan, nagapuchi. The life in the soil, you can say, the life in the soil is directly proportionate to the fertility of the soil. Many millions of microorganisms, molds, bacteria, insects, earthworms, fungi, small animals, the mycelium, the life in the soil is directly proportionate to the fertility of the soil. And you start to realize that life equals fertility. That's the equation of the natural farmer. So the more you value that life, the more you return organic matter, the more you can call this Mother Nature. In India, they call her Bhumi Dev. In South America, they call her Pachimama. I think maybe in Holland, you will have another name. Every culture on this planet has honored the soil. It's been recognized as a divinity. And if you look at the society today, food is just functional. You eat to go to job, to get money, and the cycle goes on until, again, we spin out further and further. And we lost this most fundamental understanding that this life is sacred in the soil. And it comes about by decomposing organic matter. So it's a very, very simple technique to return organic matter back to the soil. But when you start to return organic matter back to the soil and leave it and allow life in the soil to emerge, what happens is a lot of plants come up on their own when you stop plowing, when you stop trying to define nature. Like this one behind you here, that's called the Attaparam in Tamil, the Ramphal, Hindi mein. So this is a very delicious fruit, and it's growing wild everywhere on the farm, as is the custard apple, as is the tamarind, as is the guava, as are the blue flowers, the sangapu, as are mangoes, as are papayas and turmeric and various other plants like the sangapu, the sundakai, Hindi mein jangli bengan. So there's a lot of diversity of plants that start to come up when you allow nature. We don't give a chance. It's like if you are an artist, or a healer or some other beautiful talent you have, but we push you to be engineer. When does that quality of yours emerge? It doesn't, So we create a world where, where food becomes just very industrialized. And if you look at the industrialization of food and the effect it's had on the planet, you could say it's one of the major contributing factors to climate change. It's the industrialization of food. Let's just take potatoes, because everyone eats potatoes. Every household there'll be potatoes, but potatoes don't grow here. So if you ask, your great grandparents, kolopati killinga, உருளைக்கிழங்கு சாப்பிட்டுச்சா சின்ன வயசுல இல்லைங்க உருளைக்கிழங்கு இங்க வளர முடியாது. So the grandmother, she never ate those things. So you see this culture of Tamil Nadu Natyam, with the Carnatic music, with the the esoteric texts, the Nadi Jadagam, with the temples that the architects don't know how to build anymore, with the language which itself is 40,000 years old. This culture is like a banyan tree. It's an amazing culture. People are in awe of the culture in Tamil Nadu. I mean, India in general, but we're in Tamil Nadu, so we talk about Tamil Nadu. How did that culture emerge? Not with potatoes, not with Maggi noodles, not with pizza, not with all those things that we like to eat. They're nice to eat, sure. But it emerged with a relationship with where our food comes from. And it's the same in Holland. It's the same in China, same in Japan, same in every country. People had a relationship. And you start to understand that this subject that we're meeting about today is not organic farming. It's about cultural redemption. Because the society that doesn't know where its food comes from, that society has lost its culture. And humanity without culture will perish. And that's ultimately what's happening in our world today. You see, you go in England, there is supermarket with, 10, 20 varieties of apples, as you know. And they're from New Zealand, Australia and California, nothing from England. And people have no idea what is growing in England at that time, because food is so industrialized. And there's a fragmentation. People won't look in the eye. They'll be like this, They don't... ஒரு பயம் இருக்கு நம்ம சமுதாயத்துல இங்கிலாந்துல. வணக்கம். Hi, welcome. So you start to understand, வணக்கம். You start to understand that this subject really is not about organic farming. It's about reclaiming that that cultural heritage, which is a birthright. So if you're grown up here, and Tamilians, the beauty of this subject here is that it's still much more alive in India, especially in places like Tamil Nadu, also in Bengal, Orissa, various states. And you see that you're still familiar with eating varatanda and varpu and ponangani and varatang, and all those things are those traditional foods, a banana flower, banana stem. They're still familiar with people in their palate, in their diet, and that is a great blessing to still have. If you go to England, for example, much more complicated. People just don't know. Here and there will be some pockets. So rediscovering our relationship with the food that grows easily around us, local foods that grow without effort. Because they grow without effort, they grow everywhere. They're in abundance. Because they're in abundance, they're non-exclusive. If you're rich, you have pizza. If you're poor, you don't have pizza. It becomes a division in the society. But you put a drumstick spinach in the muringakkirilla, adu pichikarum rajum saapida mudiyum. Beggar and a king can equally eat that drumstick spinach. So it becomes an adhesive in a society. It's the very essential meaning of that food becomes the really foundation for a culture to emerge. And that becomes that knowledge to eat that drumstick spinach that is our cultural identity. When we say, yeah, we're Tamilian, that is your identity, that you know that food and this food and that food. And from there, because I think without the body, there is no language, there is no, there is nothing else. I think in Upanishad they write something like first is the anna, then comes the manna. So the anna is rice, it's a body manifestation, and the manna is more the mind and all of that. So this is what we're looking at in this farm. The cafe is a very, very useful tool for that, because you take banana stem, local farmer can't sell banana stem in the market. He will put more money for petrol to go to the market than he will get money for the banana stem. It has no economic value, has a huge nutritional value, medicinal value, has a lot of other values, ecological value, has no food miles. Like you take, again, we didn't finish talking about the potatoes. To bring a potato to this bioregion, this area, we have to manufacture a lorry. So to manufacture a lorry, we need factories for the paint, factories for the tires, for the engine, for the metals, for the plastics, for electronics, for the petroleum, for the infrastructure for the petroleum, pipes and oil refineries. And so we're talking about hundreds of kilometers of factories to bring a potato to this bioregion where it doesn't grow anyway. And then we'll have our fingertips and discuss about yoga and spirituality. There's no sense to it, But that's what we do. That's where we're at, all of us, on to a certain extent. So understanding those local foods is what this cafe has really, allowed us to do. Because as I say, banana stem, you can't really sell it. But if I give it to you to eat, or I put it in a basket, if I facilitate your use of it, then it has a value, as does banana flour, as does all the different spinaches. Now, if you look at a farm like this farm is it's in a little just on a personal level, it's on a little difficult level point right now. We have had heavy rains, so we only in the last month managed to start picking things up again. But the very heart of the farm is really alive. It's very beautiful. And you might wonder, how do you create this sort of diversity? Well, this diversity comes about in a very simple way. You can observe that in any jungle, in any forest. There are different relationships between the plants according to their physiology. Some plants go tall, some plants are creepers, some plants are carpet crops, some are small shrubs, big shrubs. So you have a diversity of physiology, which you can see in any jungle. And then you have different time duration. So you have very short duration crops and medium duration crops, longer duration crops, very long duration crops. So if we start a food forest tomorrow, firstly we'll plant the fruit trees. Then we'll plant medium duration crops like banana, papaya, the drumstick, agati spinach, tapioca. And then we will plant things like, lady's finger, cucumbers, all these type of things. Then we go for the spinaches. And then there's another group of plants which I feel are the very, very interesting plants, and those are the weeds. So the weeds are the plants that tick all the boxes of local food. That is, that they're easy to grow, they use less water, high medicinal nutritional value. There's no expertise in growing them. Anyone, they just grow. So when we start to explore those foods, we start to pull on this thread of cultural redemption, of reclaiming a knowledge, because I can guarantee you it's those foods that everyone had access to, back in the past. And it's those foods that are really the fabric of our culture. So let's start having a look at those, and we'll go around the farm. This is the first one to share with you. It's this is called chicken spinach. Well, with translation of the name, locally we call it korikire, or I think it's kori basile, they say in Chennai. But it's a great spinach. You can make a sabji with it. You can make a palak paneer. You can put it in chutneys. We put it in smoothies. It goes in the salad. Even the stem can be eaten, and it grows so easily. I mean, this ground here is a little dry, but if you put it in a little soil and just cover it with some soil, it'll just grow. There's nothing to do more than that, It'll grow. So it's like, wow, if I can use that a few times a week in my diet, obviously that's good for me, because it just comes up in between all the other crops. We can go this way a little bit. So this here is not a weed as such, but it behaves like a weed. It grows completely, wild, and it has very high medicinal value. This is called tippali in Tamil. In Latin, it's called pippalongum. It's the long black pepper, and it grows in the shade. So there's another value of local foods. It's more of a technical value that it grows where other plants can't grow. And it has these beautiful fruits. This is how sort of big they get. And this is really good for COVID. It's good for all respiratory disease. It's good for stimulating the digestive fire. And it's like, it just grows everywhere on the farm. It has a good economic value. Imagine we could get it planted in every single farmer's, under trees where nothing else is growing. It's like, it would be an amazing benefit for local farmers. This is called mushroom spinach or Gangetic primrose. This also is a very delicious spinach to eat because it has a nice texture, the leaf. Tastes a bit like mushrooms. And it tastes very much like mushrooms actually when you eat it. It's does someone want to try? Yeah. Can you pass some around? And you can even eat the flower as well. If you can eat the leaves, you usually can eat the flower. Yeah. So there are so many plants that we eat like this, like the guava leaf also we eat. And then by your feet behind you is this small white flower. This is called Ponangani, type of Ponangani spinach. We eat that. And then next to you, your name is Kanan? Where the blue flower, the sangapu. You can pick up that blue flower for me, please. Would you mind? Yeah. And you can just show it to people. So the sangapu we use a lot as well. Sangapu is good for women, for uterus, good for epilepsy actually. It's good for memory. And it's just growing everywhere. We make a lovely juice with it. We put it in chutneys, we put it in ice creams. It's amazing. We have all this diversity just growing around us.